Hello. Now, one of the things this channel is trying to do is look at areas that the human race seems to have either ignored or reduced down to some simplistic idea. But if you focus upon it and open it up, it seems to be saying so much and indicating a very interesting direction with which to explore it further. And this is one of those areas. And a good way into it is to put it in the form of a question. So, if you were to split the whole of existence into two parts, what would those two parts be? And this is a good question because there's a lot of answers. So you're probably thinking everything can be either positive or negative. Or there's the scientific view that everything is either energy or matter. But on this occasion, I'd like to start it off with, on the left-hand side, putting the word what. Now, you might think that a bit strange, and what's it referring to? Well, it's easy in one way. It's anything that you can call a what. So, what's that? It's a chair. What's that animal? It's a dog. What am I standing on? It's the planet. What's that up in the night sky? It's the universe. And it can appear that everything is a what, including light and electricity and radio waves. But actually there's something else at play as well. And I wonder if you can guess what that is. What would you put on the other side of the line? Well, it's the word who. So everything in existence is either a what or a who. And we instinctively know this very well, and we don't get confused whether to use the word what or who. So, for example, you don't say, who's that chair? And you don't you don't point at a dog and say, who's that? Although, interestingly, where animals are concerned, you can partially consider them a who, because, for example, some people get so attached to their pets that they feel they are dealing with a little who. But, for whatever has caused words to form up in our mind, and we live in a very intelligent universe and everything around us indicates that great intelligence, maybe it is reflected into how we've ended up using words too. So we tend to use the word who in relation to people. So, for example, if you're at a social gathering and somebody walks in through the door, you might say to your friend, who's that? But if you were to say to them, somebody walks in the door and you say, what's that that's just walked through the door? It's positively insulting. You are reducing the who of that person into the what. And if someone said that to you, you'd be incensed. So we know very well the difference between who and what. And we actually have two different worlds of response depending upon what we're dealing with. So, to take an example, if there was an explosion in the neighbourhood, the first thought, or very quickly comes into our consideration, is what caused it? Is it a who or a what? Now, if a what caused it, it could be a gas leak and then some sort of electrical equipment nearby with a spark and kaboom. And that calls for a certain order of response, finding remedy, putting it in limiting the damages, looking to see what caused it so we could prevent it happening again, and it's considered an accident. But if it was done deliberately, if there was somebody behind it, we have a whole different reaction. We want to find out who that person was, or is it a collection of people? And we would like to track them down. We might spend 10 or 20 years getting to find out who that person or people were. And then when we catch them, we punish them. We put them in prison for 10, 20 years. And then there would be the thought that when they come out of the prison, they wouldn't do it again. But being a who, you never quite know what they're going to do and whether they might do it again. And so, really, what are the fundamental differences between the what and the who? Well, the what is consistent. It has properties. It has characteristics of behavior. And once you get to know them, they are predictable. So take the weather. It's very complicated, but we've got to understand it better. And now we're becoming quite good at really predicting what the weather will be like over the next few days, because we know that the way it works is consistent. But if you take the WHO, and while we can be accused of being a bit running on autopilot and rather predictable, it's clear that the WHO has the ability to be independent. It can choose, it can bring things into the picture that its normal programming wouldn't consider. Whereas in the what, really it can only respond to what its programming is saying it should do. And again, with animals, they seem to generally run on their programming, but obviously to some extent they can act a bit independently. But it is really more clear when it comes to the human case. So take, for example, you've probably seen the documentaries where thousands upon thousands of wildebeest migrate across the African savannah. And they have to cross rivers which are filled with crocodiles who pick them off easily. And yet none of them stop and think, hey, I'm not going to do this. It's too dangerous. Look at that river. But if it was people having to do that, you can sort of bet your life that some people will be going, well, I'm not crossing that river. I'm not going to do that foolish thing along with everybody else. But the animals don't really think that way. And a good example of the WHO and how it can operate independently of the way everything else is going, take the man Gandhi. Now, he was involved in liberating India from the British rule, and that involved fighting the British at times. And you'd think that the message Gandhi would give his fellow countrymen would be fight stronger and harder to make sure we drive the British out. But he did things differently. When the fighting started, he said at times that he would starve himself until the fighting stopped. And it proved to be very influential in how the campaign went in changing the British rule in India. And this is what the WHO is capable of. It can operate outside of its programming. And we could say, well, let's call the scientists in. Let's see if we can put the WHO in a bottle, produce a fact sheet describing what it's made out of and what its behaviour is like. And yet, with the WHO, whilst we're surrounded by the what, we're positively living in an ocean of what. You can't take a single step without tripping over the what. But when it comes to the WHO, you can't put your finger on it. It's invisible, it's weightless, it has no form, and it's almost intangible. And yet, if you think about the kind of things you watch on the television, 80–90% of it is all about the affairs of the WHO. Or when you pick up a newspaper, most of the articles, if not positively nearly all of them, are about the activities and behaviours of the WHO. So it is a major part of what happens on this planet, and it is hugely significant about what we pay attention to in this world. Because whilst we can have a documentary talking about nature or the way the planet works, the majority of programs are about the activities of people and really the properties of this mysterious WHO. And then there's that immortal question, who am I? And I don't know if you've ever tried to explore that one, because at first you'll come up with, well, I'm a man and I worked in IT, and in a way thinking that defines who you are. But really that's the bit of the what that you ended up your life dealing in. It's not really who you are. And if you explore it further, you get into senses that the WHO doesn't seem to have boundaries. It seems to disappear over the horizon, and it isn't so much a something as more it occupies things. And at the heart of the who, this is what I found, it's almost like you can't detect anything there at the heart of it. But on the other hand, it's clearly a something. I am clearly a something, as are you. But it seems to resist being able to put words on it. And often I've had to come to the thought that all I can say about who I am is suggested by my nature or my inclination or my wishes. I can't ever seem to turn it into a something. And yet the what is really, on every occasion, it's a something. So what is the relationship between the what and the who? And isn't it about time that we started looking into this, bringing it to the front of our mind? And the human race is great at exploring things and coming to better understandings about it. And why have we not totally ignored this one? It's obviously always coming up in our considerations. But as the human race collectively, we tend to just push this to the background, where actually it's at the foreground. It is, in a sense, if you took the who out of this planet, it could seem meaningless. No? And there's certain words that go with the who that don't fit with the what. So now some of these words obviously you could relate into the animal level. As we've said, the animals seem to be a halfway house, but really they belong with people. So for example, leadership is only a consideration of the who. You don't find anything in the what to do with leadership. And it's only the who that can make something important. The what doesn't make anything important, it just has reactions and behaviours. But the who can make something important, and then they act differently because of that. And it's only the who that has emotions and a mentality. And it's only the who that talks of justice and fairness. And the word hope only belongs with the who. I mean, your computer doesn't hope. It's the person on the keyboard that hopes the computer's not going to start playing up. So there's so much that belongs with the who that if it wasn't present, it would be a vast section of the experience of life that would be missing. So it's about time we started looking into this in a far more opening up way about what this is saying. And it's not just a background add-on to life. It seems to be something that's at the heart of what gives life the significance and value that we feel towards it. So something to be explored. And we're now living in a time where perhaps we won't relegate this to a background consideration and bring it as a central consideration in what this life is suggesting.